everyone, this is Iggy, and today I'm going to explain how to use Bodypaint and set up a model that has multiple maps for using with Bodypaint and Cinema 4D. To start off, this is a rather lengthy tutorial. I'm just going to warn you right now, and it has a lot of little things you have to do in it, so bear with me because I don't usually do this every single time. I actually cheat, and I have a file saved that I just quickly load when I have to do seams or anything of that sort. Also, to further explain what you're looking at, this is Cinema 4D's interface. And you'll notice that my interface probably looks very different from yours. For one thing, mine's teal. But that aside, for the most part, it is default. The only difference that I'm going to point out is the material palettes here. And you're going to actually need this to be loaded for this exercise. So if it's not already loaded, you're going to go to Window, and then you're going to go to Material Manager here and click it, and it'll open if it's not already. Now, we're going to import V4, which is on my desktop for easy access. And she's going to be my guinea pig for today. And you see she imports and she has a whole bunch of materials. Now to explain better, V4 has 3 maps that go to her. She has a face map, she has a torso map, and then she has a limbs map. Basically what we're going to do is set this up so that each of the maps can be represented by each of the materials. So instead of using all of these materials, we're only going to use representative materials, ones that basically represent each of the 3 maps that she has. So we're going to go ahead and delete some of these out, and I'm going to leave the skin hip to represent the torso. And I'm going to keep deleting past that point. And I'm going to leave skin leg to represent her limbs. And then I'm going to delete, oops, all the way to skin face, and then I'm going to leave that to represent her face and delete the last 3 after it. Now if you look over here in the top right, you'll see a series of icons that don't really make much sense, and they move horizontally, which isn't very helpful. So instead of looking at this horizontally, we're going to go to View, and then we're going to hit Vertical Tags here, and this is going to basically take that same menu and layer it vertically instead, so we can better see what we're doing and working with here. And you'll see a series of textures that have X on them. Those are the ones that we actually just deleted. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of those, leaving only the black ones, as these are our 3 that are represented to the left. And now what you have is a very scary V4, and the sounds of my dog coming in the room behind me. So now before we move on with the materials, what we need to do is we need to group our mesh to also have 3 basic groups that are going to be represented by these 3 materials. So we're going to start off with face, and we're going to select all the things. Actually, we don't even need that. We only need the skin and the lip and the nostril. And we're going to select those polygons. Then we're going to come over here to the left, this series of buttons that are over here, and we're going to click this one with the orange square. This is basically your faces. And then we're going to click on her face, and you will notice that her face turns yellow. go to selection at the top of Cinema 4D and come all the way down here and go to set selection. Now what set selection does is it turns your selection into a polygon selection. So now we're going to come over here and rename it face so that we know that that goes to the face. Then we're going to select the face texture, come down here, and we're going to drag and drop this face into the selection right here. This basically tells that polygonal selection that it uses the face map for a texture. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to load a texture in. And I'm going to use Prisoner of War because she's got that gnarly tattoo and it'll be a good example. I'll just use one of her makeups. Color. And then you'll notice when we have this selected, the texture shows. Also, we're going to come over here and just hide the polygons for the eyebrows because we aren't going to be using the eyebrows for this. So basically, now we have the face set up. We need to do the same thing for the limbs and the head. So we're going to go to head, neck, torso, nipple, hip, and I think that would be all. Actually, select these polygons. Oops, yeah, you have to be careful sometimes because if you don't make sure that you've selected away, it will end up counting the selection that you had before. So we're going to try this one more time. Neck, torso, nipple, hip. And select. And that's more like it. This will select just her torso. And we're going to go up to set selection again. And we're going to name this one torso. Seems pretty simple. And we need the skin hip. And once again, we're going to drag this torso name to there. And now we have a torso. And we're going to load the tattoo map for the torso as soon as I can find it. And you want to make sure that color is checked off and nothing else is. Because if you're trying to do seams and you have something like specular checked off or any of the others, it might actually seem like there's a seam there when there isn't, so it's best to just only have color checked off for this. So now we've set up our head and our torso. Let's set up the last one, which is the limbs. So we need the arms and the foot and the forearm and the hand and the leg. And you can do toenails and fingernails too if you'd like. I don't usually mess with the fingernails or the toenails too much because I'm boring like that. And actually, once again, let's check and make sure that we don't have the torso still selected before we do that. And I always forget to do that. And let's go ahead and select those things again. Toenail, fingernail. Select polygons. Click and see, it does it to me every time. Oh my god. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Skin hand, skin leg, fingernail, toenail. Select polygons. And there we go. And we're going to go up, set the selection, and we're going to call this one limbs. And our last black map is gonna accept the limbs selection. And we're gonna go ahead and load our tattoo map for the limbs. Make sure we check that off. Okay, so now when we select all three of these, we have a full map and a full texture. So now what we're going to do is we're going to switch interfaces. Right now I'm in startup layout, which, you know, is basically for modeling or whatever you set it to start up as. But now we're going to switch to Bodypaint. And you can see this is a whole new can of worms over here. This is completely different than the interface that we just looked at. But really, you're only going to use certain things in it for starters anyway. So the first thing you're going to do is click this button right here. It has a paintbrush on it and it says 3D. If you hover over it, it says enable the 3D painting mode. We're going to click that. And then the button that's right next to it, which has a paintbrush on a ball that has checkers on it, it says enable disable projection painting. We're going to click that too. Now, over here on the right, you will see tabs. And basically, to get to the materials, you're going to want to click on the materials tab. And you'll see that these are all X'd out. These will not become enabled until you click them. And now you'll notice over here, everything smooths out and becomes way more prominent. That's because you're in projection painting mode now. So you can go ahead and click all of these. Now this texture doesn't have seams, obviously, as it's already been de-seamed. And I actually used body paint to paint the tattoo on. But just to demonstrate how you're going to use C4D, or body paint rather. Over here is colors. You can choose any color in the spectrum that you want. Let's go with teal, because I squeal for teal. And we're just going to paint. And you can see that it not only, oops, I don't have something selected. Oh, and that's another thing I want to mention, that if you want to mask off certain areas and not paint through, you can select one of these at a time. Or you can select them all. If you select them all, then you can actually paint across. And she's looking rather Martian-like. So let's undo all this. And now that we're selected, we can actually just paint whatever. In any color we choose. And that looks like a mess. Now over here we have a clone brush. This is what you use actually to de-seam, or one of the things that you will use. If you zoom in real close, see how the seam shows when you move it? You can see the seam is right there. This will help guide you. But if you don't see a seam there, then it obviously doesn't need to be de-seamed. But to seam with the clone brush, or to de-seam with it, you're just going to clone part of the texture, and you're just going to see, you have to be careful of that, and you just paint over the area that you want to de-seam. Now, body paint works very similarly to Photoshop, so you'll notice that a lot of the options are almost the same as Photoshop. I mean, you've got, oops, the blur brush and a smudge brush. You've got dodge and burn and a sponge brush. you have an erase brush, note that the erase brush will only work if you have layers enabled in your texture. For instance, new layer. And if I paint this just a mess all over it, you'll notice that it comes through. But if you try to erase it in projection mode, it won't erase. That's because you have to actually come over to the texture map itself and erase it there instead. And of course, you have to actually have an active layer and you're painting on that layer. And you can make the brushes as big as you want. And you have pressure, hardness, spacing, all the things that you would have basically in Photoshop, which do different things. So you can experiment with it and get a feel for how everything works. And of course, it does work with a tablet, so you can set things like pen pressure and size. So it works just like basically Photoshop does. And I'm just going to get rid of this layer. Anyway, so that's pretty much all you have to do to get started de-seaming your characters or your models, whichever. And that pretty much concludes this tutorial. Hope you'll join me next time.